Good evening and welcome to the January meeting of the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority Commission. I am Andrew Taharzadeh, Assistant Director of Communications at the EDA. I am your moderator for this meeting, which means I will have control over the audio functions of this Zoom call, and I will control the PowerPoint slides that will be used for the meeting. At this time, I would like to ask all those on the call to mute themselves. Now, I would like to welcome members of the commission to the meeting. Chairman Kathy Lang, Vice Chairman James Quigley, Secretary Ron Johnson, Treasurer and Assistant Secretary Stephen Partridge, and members Lenny Hainsworth, Rocky Mitchell, and Rick Wagner. FCEDA President and CEO Victor Hoskins and Executive Vice President Alex Imes are on the call, as are EDA Consul Mike Graff, a number of EDA staff members, consultants who represent the EDA in offices overseas and California, along with our marketing communications consultants. I would also like to welcome Fairfax County officials who have joined us for this meeting, as well as our guest speaker, Deborah Ratner Salzberg of RMS Investment Group, and Jeff Herbert and Olivia Moss of HRNA Advisors. This is a public meeting of the commission and is being recorded. Presenting from the FCEDA tonight will be Chairman Lang, President Hoskins, Vice President of Communications, Alan Fogg, and Talent Initiatives Director, Michael Batt. Members of the EDA Commission who have questions will have the opportunity to ask questions as they normally would during meetings. If anyone from the public has any questions, please select the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom screen to ask a question, or email Cheryl Martelli of the FCEDA. Cheryl's email address can be found in the chat box. We will not answer questions from the public during the meeting, but we will respond to all questions in writing afterward. So with that, I will ask Chairman Lang to begin the agenda. Chairman Lang.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and a very good evening to everybody and a happy new year. I do want to welcome everyone to the January meeting. We do have a very interesting meeting tonight. In addition to our regular items, we will hear from this month's guest speaker, who is one of the nation's leading developers who has specialized in creating vibrant new places and spaces. So Debbie, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. We're also going to hear from Jeff Herbert and Olivia Moss from HRNA Advisors, which is working with the EDA and Fairfax County on the economic recovery framework. And we also look forward, of course, to hearing what they have to say to us tonight. So let's get started. I would first like to ask that we approve the minutes of the December meeting. So may I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Hainsworth. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Quigley. Is there any comments? Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Johnson. I note in the minutes with respect to the matter of Commissioner Partridge, which by the way I supported, the document does not encapsulate my comments regarding that, and I would like for the record to reflect my comments, but they're not there.
Okay, all right. Well, then let's work together to make sure we refresh them. They will be on tape, so we will get them off the tape and put them on for you. And then we will, so I just as a point of order, shall we wait or can we agree with that addition to approve the minutes? I'd like for Mike to jump in on that.
I think that's the correct approach,
Okay.
Chairman Lang, is if it's the pleasure of the commission, we could approve the minutes subject to correction based on Dr. Johnson's request.
That sounds fine.
Well, that said, Madam Chairman, I call for the question.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. We'll make sure that we capture that and make sure we'll run it by you also to make sure that you see what is in the document.
Yes,
So,
thank you. I certainly appreciate that, Madam Chair. No problem.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. And so I think, Mike, do we want to do a roll call? I think we should, as we normally do.
Oh,
So,
with respect to the minutes?
yeah,
Yeah, happy to do that. Ms. Hainsworth,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye, aye,
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Wagner,
Aye.
Mr. Partridge,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Quigley,
Aye.
and Chairman Lang.
aye. Thank you. I think we'll just keep our tradition going with that. It seems to work very well.
Right.
So at our September meeting, you might remember that we began a series of guest speakers to provide us with some thought leadership around a variety of topics and to help us think about not just now, but how we're going to operate in the future, especially in light of so many of the things that are going on around us, particularly COVID-19 and the economic recovery that we will be facing and the challenges thereof. These leaders are helping us with our strategic vision and also help us, the staff, think about things that they may want to do more of or do less of as we go through this process. So I'm asking Vice Chairman Quigley tonight to introduce our speaker. So with that, Chairman Quigley, Vice Chairman
Thank you.
Quigley.
Thank you, Kathy. Tonight, we are very pleased to have Deborah Ratner Salzberg with us. Deborah Ratner Salzberg is a partner at RMS Investment Group, a family office specializing in real estate and financial investing. Deborah has spent the past 35 years active in the real estate sector, most recently serving as the DC Region Chairman of Brookfield Properties. Prior to joining Brookfield, Deborah was the president of Forest City, Washington, Inc., a division of Forest City Realty Trust, a national real estate firm that specialized in the development, construction, ownership, and management of mixed-use commercial and residential projects. Ms. Salzberg began her professional career as a trial attorney in the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. She serves on the boards of two public companies, CubeSmart and Capital Bank, and is on the board of trustees for Kenyon College, the Foundation for National Archives, and Planet Word. Ms. Salzberg is a member of the Real Estate Advisory Committee for the New York State Common Retirement Fund, a member of the board of the University of Pennsylvania Institute of Urban Research, and is a chairman of the Federal City Council. At Forest City, she led the team that repositioned the Ballston Mall in Arlington into a mixed-use Ballston Quarter. Forest City also developed the yards on the Capitol Riverfront in Washington, D.C., where Nationals Park and Audi Field are located. Her organization also helped create the Biotech Park at MIT, built a tech park in East Baltimore at the Johns Hopkins Hospital campus, and redeveloped Stapleton Airport in Denver into a mixed-use center. She's a true icon in real estate. Deborah will talk tonight about the importance of placemaking when building new developments, but also about the importance of public-private partnerships and a long-term vision when developing these landmark projects. Deborah, welcome to our meeting. The floor is all yours.
Okay, I'm unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
You can, absolutely.
Okay, great. I think, who was it, Andrew? I'm trying to find out trying to find the person who's moving my slides.
Hey, Deborah. Yes.
Andrew.
Okay, Andrew. So hopefully I'm going to remember to tell you that to move the slides. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to go quickly. You've asked me to talk about my two favorite projects. So, and the other thing is I have myself on a timer, but if, Andrew, it looks like I'm running over, by all means, wave, shake, cut me off, do something. I will not be offended in any way. But with that, I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be talking to you tonight about placemaking, really, and economic development and placemaking. And I'm going to do this by discussing two of the projects that were mentioned, which are the Yards in Washington, D.C. and Ballston Quarter in Arlington, Virginia. I think the slides can go up. Okay. So we are starting with the yard. So first, just a little bit of history, because I just love the history so much, I can't not talk about it. Thomas Jefferson selected our naval yard site. It is the longest serving naval site in the country. It started out as an ammunitions and shipbuilding manufacturing site. It grew tremendously. The Naval Yard took over the Naval Annex, which is now known as what then became the Southeast Federal Center. And it really at one point had 26,000 people working there. But post World War II, munitions changed, the site changed, and by the late 1990s, it really was surplus property, and the government had to decide what to do with it. Next slide, please. Today, it is the yards, which is 48 acres. 42 acres were from the original Navy Yard and Annex, and 6 acres were formerly DC property. When the site was put out to bid, it was entitled already for 1.8 million square feet of commercial, 3,400 residential units, 400,000 square feet of retail, and 5.5 acre public park. Today, we have 1,300 residential units, 20% are affordable, more about that later. We're about halfway done with the retail, 197,000 square feet. We have a 225 room hotel, the 5.5 acre open park, and under construction, our first build to suit office building. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? Well, we got here because Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton decided that she didn't want another federal enclave here, that there were too many federal enclaves along the DC waterfront, and DC residents did not have access to the water. Simultaneously, the district government was thinking the same thing, and working with Congresswoman Norton, the legislation was introduced to have the Southeast Federal Center Public-Private Development Act of 2000 enacted, which authorized the GSA to put out an RFP for a private partner. This RFP people began thinking about it in 2000. I was invited to the site to meet with the GSA project manager and with the director of planning for the district to talk about what we as national developers thought we could do with the site, because we had experience with the old Stapleton Airport and other large projects. By the time the RFP came out in 2007, there was a plan. In 2004, there was a plan that we bid on, which you can see the plan in 2007 at the top of this. The plan was issued by the GSA with district input. GSA was responsible for the ultimate land cost, the phasing of the takedown, because it was federal land. They were flexible with timing and sequencing. They had architectural approvals, remediation funding, and they were flexible enough to realize this was a new neighborhood and we could get paid extensions through 2035. Now, this was because it was a new neighborhood. There was no baseball stadium there at the time. The district was responsible for public financing. It had 2 different pilot streams for infrastructure and public realm. It also had requirements that went along with this public infrastructure, affordable housing requirements, as I mentioned, 20% affordable, and local hiring requirements. So what lessons did we bring to this process, and did we walk away from the process with? 1, we were bidding on a coordinated plan. This was also true at Stapleton in Denver. There was a plan that initially was worked out between GSA and the district, so we knew what we were bidding on and what we could get zoned. But the key was the plan was flexible. If you look at the top and you look at the bottom, 2007 to 2016, there are differences. I could move office and residential. I could move timing of projects. I could change the way the upper left quadrant and office section looked versus the way it looks now. And that flexibility allowed us to build a much better project. Public financing made it possible. At the end of the day, both of these projects relied on public financing for the public realm, and the public realm is what makes these projects viable, in my opinion. And this project had a long-term horizon. I mentioned to you that this was going to be, we had extensions, which we hoped never to have to use, but for a 35-year period of time, I guess a 25-year period of time. But we knew we were going to be building through cycles. When you're building a project of this size over a long period of time and creating a new neighborhood, it takes time. Both parties have to have a long horizon and understand and be willing to go through different cycles together. Next slide, please. So what made the Yards a success? At the end, what made the Yards a success was placemaking. Placemaking in a lot of different ways. Initially, placemaking in the public space. So we began the Yards as we were supposed to. We put in the infrastructure, the roads, the sidewalks, and we were supposed to start with our first apartment building. Well, we started it and we had to stop it. It was 2008. We hit our first cycle, our down cycle. Ultimately, we went to the District of Columbia and said, look, you have public financing. You want to put people to work. There is no financing for residential at this moment. Let's get started on the park. And the district went along with it. We started building Yards Park. We started in 2009, in the middle of the recession. It opened in 2010. You see in front of you the water feature with kids in front of it. This park opened and there was nothing else at the Yards. My office was downtown at the time. We hadn't moved to the Yards. I got a phone call that said, concerned people saying, you need to get a lifeguard for that water feature. It is packed. Fortunately, the bid was running it. I wasn't responsible for it. But the reality is, the minute it opened, we are a stone's throw from Capitol Hill. We are across the street from public housing. Everybody was together in this park. It was the great equalizer. It was the best use of public planning and public money I could have envisioned. And I was wrong, okay? Because when I looked at that plan that had the park and was 5.5 acres and cost $30 million, I sat there and said, there is no way this is the best use of property. I mean, there has to be a higher and best use. And as I said, I was wrong. This brought the neighborhood together and it created place before there was a building. Next slide. How else did we do placemaking? We did placemaking through retail. Our first projects were adaptive reuse, older buildings. We knew that in DC, if you could create someplace exciting, people would go anywhere. We opened, we worked with with Michael Babin of Neighborhood Retail. We opened a brewery at Boilermaker. People came down immediately. It put us on the map. At the same time, we were able to attract a Michelin star restaurateur from New York, Michael White. He didn't open a Michelin star restaurant. He opened Osteria Marini, which was a great local, still to this day, terrific food Italian restaurant, but it put us on the map as a place where people would come. We brought in a brand new ice cream maker. We brought in, the Taquerian, which was off of a food truck. We were very creative, and we brought in Potbellies. So we were very careful about creating a neighborhood. Next slide, please. As I said, we started with older buildings. So the building on the left, Foundry Lofts, was our first apartment building that was stopped. We were able to start it again with public financing through a stimulus program. It opened. When it opened, there was the dry cleaner was open. The brewery hadn't opened yet. The park was opened, and we opened this building. That was it in the Yards. This building leased up in 3 months. It was the fastest lease up in the history of Forest City at that point in time. Older buildings create character when they can be used, and they created a neighborhood. Next slide, please. So we built multifamily. I mean, this was mixed use. And as I think I said to you earlier, we had to move more quickly. We started doing an office building and we realized we couldn't lease it in 2010. And we switched it to a multifamily use. So our first buildings have all been multifamily. They were either existing buildings like Foundry Lofts, or they were all new buildings, but everyone was different. It was a mix of architecture, old and new, and all different architects. They are all mixed income, 20% affordable again. Our goal was to make sure this looked like an authentic DC community, which you will keep hearing me say, not a planned community. Next slide, please. It was critical for a mixed use community that one have office And frankly, the way we were paying for the land is we were paying more for office, so we have to build the office, but we could wait. And because we created a place, our first tenant, the Chemonics, came when they saw the neighborhood and what was created. They will open their building the end of this year. It's 309,000 square feet and a build to suit. We also were able to open the first full service hotel because we waited. And it's a Thompson Hotel from New York with a Danny Meyer restaurant, 225 keys. Next slide. So what's next? Placemaking doesn't end in a project this big. We're not even half done. This is just to tell you that we are now going to the west side where Chemonics is. You saw on the map that in the upper left quadrant, the site changed. This is our third placemaking exercise. We did last year an exercise that took 3 months with charrettes and ended up with a 50-page book. Next page, the book set the guidelines. Next slide, please. The book set guidelines for what the yards will look like going forward. So we have an internal plan. This is really just one page out of the book. It isn't anything other than to show you what goes in to serious placemaking. Now we have a plan as to different neighborhoods, how to bring people down. Ultimately, when we design the park at the very end, again, on the water, so we can bring people from the metro down to the park. So next slide. In closing, you can see before and you can see what we will look like at full build. When I talk about the yards, I talk about the fact that it really is the poster child of public-private partnerships. The GSA kept the federal process going, and they knew what it took because they had a private sector executive running this, a project executive. They knew what it took to build and stick with a long-term project. And they were willing to make those commitments, and they were flexible, and they were a great partner to DC. In DC, the mayor's office would push its agencies, was committed to this project. We had 4 different administrations, 4 different mayors. You guys worry about whether developers will still be there. We worry about what happens when an administration changes. And there was a real commitment to this project, and there still is to this day. DC Council has voted on the public financing for this project 11 times unanimously. So this has been a real dedicated effort, and it shows you that partnerships work when partners maintain commitments. So that was DC, and now we're going to go over to Arlington. I'm really sorry to go so quickly, but as I said, I have way too much to get out here. So feel free to raise your hand, slow me down, whatever. So we're going to talk about Ballston Quarter. Next slide, please. Just to place that, it is really the heart of Ballston. It's kind of the hole in the donut where Glebe and Wilson come together. Next slide. A little bit of history. This was an old strip center called Parkington Center. We were brought in 1986 to develop a mall. This was my first job at Forest City was leasing this mall. It opened, we were brought in 1983 or 1984. It opened in 1986 with 580,000 square feet and 2 anchors. Over the years, as you can see, we added numerous we had several renovations. The county also, it was a public-private partnership from the start to an extent because the garage was a public garage. The county put the Iceplex on top of the garage and built the practice rink for the Capitals in 2006. In 2008, we began working on mall redevelopment. So why did we decide that we needed to work on the redevelopment of the mall? Next page. Take a look at this graph. It kind of tells you everything. With the exception of a brief blip in 2009 to 2010, there was a steady downward trend in sales. And as you can see, it was expected to go even lower from 2016 if we didn't do something. The mall was in a steady descent, but the neighborhood was growing. So the first design study was done in 2009. We thought we'd put lipstick on the pig. We would just kind of renovate a little, and the numbers didn't work and the tenants weren't interested. We then decided to do big box with discount, off-price stores, and the county wasn't interested. So at that point, we really took a major relook and began focusing on alternatives. The retail world was changing. Malls were not in favor. And we decided, working with the county, who had its own goals, to really blow up the mall and try and create a much more outdoor, urban, permeable, street activated space. County wanted more people on Wilson. They were willing to wanted to put more street facing retail. They wanted to, they were really pushing us to redevelop because they thought this would be a catalyst, as it was for all of the development going on around us. They wanted a 21st century center of Ballston. Malls are difficult to redevelop. You're dealing with a bunch of different tenants who have different leases. It requires closing these malls over a long period of time. It is very costly. This led us to a public-private partnership. Next slide, please. This is a different public-private partnership than the Yards, but it revolved around placemaking. Both the county and we as mall owners wanted, as I said, a 21st century experience, which would have include for the county wider sidewalks, realigned streets, more street front retail, penetrable openings, not a mega block mall, and a central gathering place for concerts and community activities. To do this, we as the developer needed bonus density and height. We needed definitely public financing. Those came, the public financing came in the form of bonds or transportation funds for road alignment and sidewalk improvements. I'm just going to quickly say to you, remember this slide later, because you can see Ballston on top, which has the pedestrian connection that went from the parking garage. You could go through at that point, the mall, all the way to the metro. Originally, both the county and we thought that Forest City thought we were going to get rid of that. The county wanted people on the street. The neighborhood wanted the connection. You see the new bridge that is now up. I was in it yesterday. It is amazing. Walk through it. It's really, it was part of the public-private partnership, and it was a public art project that was done with the community and through charrettes and really tremendous participation from the public, from the county, and from the developer. Next.
You muted.
Debbie, you're on mute somehow.
All
Yep,
right,
there
am
you
I unmuted? All right, so this slide really just tells you about the public financing. It was actually more. It was a $300+ million investment, of which Arlington County contributed $54 million. It was based on sales and meals taxes, based on how much value was going to be created to Arlington over the next 30 years, and anticipated to be a major catalyst. You can see new photos from what this now looks like on the left. Okay, next slide. So today we have the new Ballston Quarter, which when it is fully leased will be 365,000 square feet of shopping. It is of shopping, dining, and entertainment. And it is attached to a 406 unit, 22-story beautiful residential tower called Origin. It has an open air pedestrian shopping and sidewalk cafes on Wilson, as well as both inside and in the plaza, and a community active amenities plaza. So we have a live, work, dine, shop, and meet location. So what was critical to making this work? One, the county, starting at the county executive, and this is through 2 county executives, were willing to try new things, and they were committed to getting this done. This was the first public-private partnership in Arlington. 2, the planning department, we were working with the planning department that had a future vision for its center space in Ballston. And the planning department changed. It could move with speed. It always responded and was accessible. Frankly, we didn't always get the answers we wanted, but we could talk to people. They were able to mobilize all the departments below them. They were able to help us do lots of different things. We changed signage regulations. We opened, things to sidewalks. We expanded sidewalk patios, and we kept tenants open during all of this. This could not have been done without all of the work on the part of the economic development project. And I'm going over for 2 minutes, but I am going to tell you that Victor Haskins came in as this project was underway. I have worked with Victor for a number of years in Baltimore, in DC, and then in Arlington. It is a tribute to the people working below him that I called Victor only one time because I couldn't get a response. He wouldn't give me the response I wanted, but he got me a response. But it is a tribute really to the people working below him that we never had to do that this was a group of committed, hardworking people. So while the lessons weren't identical to the yards, they were similar in terms of placemaking, impact, and success. We started with a plan at the yards. In Boston, the county started with a vision. Boston Quarter was going to be the center of Boston, and it was going to attract others, and it was going to be the center meeting place. We needed public financing, and that is what was critical to creating public realm. I was in Boston yesterday. There is everybody is complaining about how broken downtown DC is and how quiet it is. Neither Boston nor the yards are empty right now. There are people out there. Everybody was flexible. We learned how to work together. Everyone was committed, and we had a view to the future and long-term planning. At the end of the day, these were the lessons that we learned. And this is what makes successful placemaking. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Deborah. I know my colleagues are going to have questions. Matter of fact, I generated so many new questions, even from my prepared one in advance here. But first, I wanted to thank you on behalf of the entire EDA for sharing your vision of the importance of placemaking and attracting businesses and employees, and also the ingredients that are needed. You talked about two specific locations here, very interesting, that are also uniquely outside of Fairfax County. As you look at Fairfax, where do you think we've done placemaking well, and where do you see the biggest opportunity in Fairfax County?
So I would tell you that I think Mosaic is a very good example of Virginia placemaking. I can't tell you. I actually, to be perfectly honest, have not been out all that much recently. So I have not thought about or looked recently, but what I will do is promise you that I will. It was fun yesterday getting back out to both Boston Quarter and to the yards. So what I will do is get back to you on that one, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine. As you look at my last question, I'm going to turn over to the team. As one of our mission statements at the EDA is to support an extraordinary and equitable quality of life across Fairfax County. You mentioned both with the Navy Yard, the water feature, pulling groups in and thinking about low-cost housing. But can you provide some further thoughts on how do we think about equity when it comes to placemaking?
So let me, I actually did not go into the housing, which I had intended to. So the deal, in order to get public financing, we had to provide affordable housing. The deal that we made, this was well before inclusionary zoning or anybody was, this was 2007. Nobody was, or 2006 maybe, when we finally finalized these documents. What we said was that so long as we could use, or there was financing available, low income housing tax credit, LIHTC, we would provide 20% affordable for people earning up to 50% of median. So that was built in. So some of it was just what was in the neighborhood. In other words, we were across, as I said, across from public housing near Capitol Hill. So we were a mixed income neighborhood. And we also had hiring projects that we did on our own to say, let's hire neighborhood residents. The grocery store, Harris Teeter, opened there. They had a district hiring process to bring in neighborhoods and bring in equity. I do think that affordable housing is essential. I think that that people who use public funding need to think about how to provide housing that is affordable. I also think counties that have land need to think about what does it take to bring in affordable housing. And that may mean a zero land cost, because ultimately equity comes from people, in my opinion, from people being able to live together, to shop together, and to work together, and to see, and just to be together. And that comes from great public spaces like the Yards Park. And it comes from an ability to live, as I said, to live and share retail and other experiences together.
Right. turn it over to the rest of the commissioners.
Any other commissioners have a question for Debbie?
So
I would-
if you think of some afterwards, I'm happy to respond in writing.
I'd like to invite you to Fairfax to spend some time with us.
I would love to come, and I was embarrassed by my last answer. So after this, what I was going to do was email Victor immediately and say, I'll follow you around in a car.
I'll give you a tour.
Yeah. I love this. Live, work, dine, and shop. And that's really.
Yeah, yes. I mean, that's what we want to do. I mean, we want people, someone said to me on the phone today that they used to work at the yards and now Brookfield has moved into a Brookfield building. So everybody on the team is together and they're on New York Avenue, in like downtown. And it is really sad what's going on in downtown. And you don't have that experience at the yards, and you don't actually even have that experience, on a daily basis at Ballston Quarter, because we created a market that really, again, brought in a bunch of new, different people, different features, and people are attracted to it. All kinds of people. That is another, I think, great equalizers, food and beverage.
Rocky, I see you're on unmute. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just a question, Deborah. Given what has happened over the last year and the likelihood that it will continue, what changes, have any, has your organization implemented with regards to COVID and how it might impact your development plans? And by the way, when I was in New York 100 years ago, I believe Bruce might be your cousin or related. Bruce and I were very close friends. We served on the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce and Pratt Institute Board of Directors together.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's great.
Yeah.
So let me say that, interestingly enough, the organizations, my most recent organization, Brookfield, right now doesn't have people in the office. Okay, we have 25%. They're on a 25% reduction in people normally, and so that people come in different days, but right now they're not coming in at all because of the spike, because they are worried. However, construction has not stopped. As I said, we're turning over an office building. Construction's figured out how to be safe generally. That's not to say they haven't had to close on certain times due to COVID, but it's moving forward. And because it is moving forward, I think people are beginning to believe that once we can be outside a little more, and once we get through this spike, it's time to really think about reopening. But reopening does have to be right now with smaller groups, because we've built all these open offices, and we can really, if we're not careful and we put too many people in at one time, expose them. If you're asking me what I think is going to happen long term, I'm actually very optimistic. I don't think people will be in the office every day, but I think by fall we'll be back in the office. And I think there will be days that people are going to want everyone in their office. Do I think will it lead to yet less office going forward? Potentially, but it may also lead for larger office space. We were getting down to such small square footage per individual. It can't work. Once people have been at home and they can work in the quiet, people are going to want to work differently. They'll want to be home sometime. Their bosses will want them to be in the office. And I do think there will be some real changes in terms of office. I also think that once things reopen, we will be getting back more quickly than we anticipated. The problem is going to be keeping street retail going. Brookfield's done a great job of maintaining their retailers. And I feel like if they can hold on, and it's through breaks, it's through a whole bunch of different ways, but if they can hold on through this next phase, and assuming these vaccination programs work, we are really about to turn the corner.
Just to follow up on another thought that hit me. In your development, younger people, and especially as we've looked at people desiring or looking to relocate here in the metropolitan area, there is always a desire for younger people to be around entertainment. I think as part of your developments, what considerations beyond, especially in this area, what considerations beyond movies have you guys explored? What are the possibilities out there?
So we have experiential tenants in there. I didn't go into the retail tenants in Boston
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I ran out of time. But we have Cookology, a cooking school. We have, I can't remember the name of it, but we have which probably has not reopened yet, but we have like, I can't remember, escape rooms. All right. I mean, we have muse painting. So we have a fair number. Unfortunately, we lost Punch Bowl Social, but we had Punch Bowl Social, which was, bowling as well as eating. So we had we have really been focusing on experiential retail because that is what people want. Even the Avita was a much larger salon where people could do many other things. But we have, as I said, the Muse painting bars. So that is the future of retail. It's also why the space in the center when you come down the stairs to the market and is set up the way it is. And the market in the summer will open, the garage windows will go up, and there will be entertainment and music in there as well. So that is critical. I didn't fully answer your question. I think economic development is going to be even more important for us coming out of this, because what worked here in what I believe will ultimately work in Boston and at the yards are small local businesses, and they will need help. And these programs to help them survive now are essential, and to make your places unique in Fairfax and to make people want to be there, they're going to need help or they're not going to be able to start up again.
Thank you for that. I was a little surprised that your emphasis is on local development as opposed to some of the national entities out there. So thanks for that piece.
So national entities will need help as well. I do believe in these cities where we are in urban areas, creating place, our communities want authentic local. They want national as well because they want to be able to get things quickly and easily. And for me, as a developer, it's much easier to deal with the potbellies than it is to hold hands and show an ice cream store how to open. But at the same time, I have the success of this ice cream store is now in Whole Foods. Yeah. Okay. I mean, if you bet on the right people, you can really help them and create small businesses in your communities that turn into much bigger businesses.
Thank you very much. Small business is a crucial part of our economic strategy here in Fairfax. So thank you for that. And we've done a lot to support them actually during the COVID crisis.
It's critical.
It is critical. It is critical. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. And Victor, or who I can't remember who else offered to give me a tour. I'm going to take you up on this.
James will, but I think any of us would be happy.
Okay, well, I'd love to do it. And again, any questions that you have, by all means, please send them my way. Okay.
Thank you.
With that, I'm signing off. Bye-bye, everybody. Happy New Year. Take care.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, Victor.
So with so much excitement about hearing what Debbie had to share with us, I unfortunately had skipped over our treasurer report. So I'm going to ask our treasurer to please give the report for us tonight. And then
sure. Well, I don't think it'll be quite as exciting as our last speaker, but you've got the stuff that we sent last Friday. You can see from the budget report, we're at the 50% of the year mark, and we're at 46% of budget. So total budget was 8.8 million. We're year-to-date expenses of 4,025,580. So we're under budget overall. Some notes that the team put in there. So you can see that our town initiative expenditures are about 539,000 of an $800,000 budget. That's running a little higher than the 50% mark related to the launch of the new website last year. And salary expenses are running at 46% versus the 45% in operating, slightly higher due to the third pay cycle in the month of December. So overall, we're looking good. If anything, we'll probably have to have conversations as we get further in the year and make sure that we reallocate funds that aren't getting drawn down, but the team is aware of that and we'll be in touch as the year goes on and making changes accordingly.
Any questions? Thank you very much. So let me now move on to Executive Vice President Iams, who is going to introduce speakers from HRNA Advisors, who will discuss the county's economic recovery framework.
Thank you, Chairman Lang, and good evening, commissioners and everyone else who is attending tonight's meeting. It's my pleasure to speak to the economic recovery framework that HRNA has been working on with us and the Department of Economic Initiatives since the summertime. And if you can believe this, despite everything that we've been doing this year, we also wanted to start to think ahead for the various programs and initiatives that the county, including the EDA, but the county's various economic development related entities could pursue in the next really 2 to 3 years when you think about the trajectory and arc of what recovery looks like. So this is a framework, it's a toolkit. Some of the things are immediately actionable, other things will be there for us to draw upon as we go along. And it certainly will build upon the many incredible things that the EDA and the county have achieved this year, like the RISE grants, the microloan program, the technical assistance for entrepreneurs, and the virtual career fairs. With that, I want to give the floor to Olivia Moss and Jeff Hebert from HRNA. Olivia is a principal at HRNA, and Jeff is a partner, and they are going to present the recovery framework, and then we'll have discussion and Q&A with you all.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks, commissioners. And I have to say thank you to the team at the EDA. I see Alex and Spencer, I think I can see on my screen, have been excellent help and resources to us to advance this economic recovery framework. So thank you for that partnership between the EDA and the county in advancing this work. We start from a place of understanding the growth trajectory that Fairfax County has had over several years and the impacts that COVID-19 and the lockdown and a lot of the retrenchment in business, all those factors that have come to bear in Fairfax, understanding them and then starting to think about what a recovery looks like for the county and putting a framework together that can be used as a tool, as Alex said, for the EDA and for the county in thinking through next steps and I love this picture that we found, a sunnier day for the county. Next slide, please. So the overview of our work and our scope, we started, as Alex said, this summer in a stakeholder needs assessment and working recovery framework development process. We did stakeholder engagement with a wide variety of business leaders, folks in Fairfax County government, community leaders and others in roundtables and a survey that we sent out. We reviewed the pre-COVID demographic and economic conditions, and we synthesized that into needs and challenges based on what we heard. This fall, we worked through an economic impact assessment, looking at COVID-19's impact on the economy of Fairfax County, and running a bit in parallel with that. And what we're doing now is really developing the strategy that sort of undergirds the framework and program recommendations that we're in the stages of doing final development on that, and you will see in later part of the presentation. Next slide. And so our approach began with an understanding of, and unfortunately this slide is kind of interesting looking, but imagine that there's a pre-COVID steady growth, and then you hit the emergency response period of COVID-19 where you take a dive, and then you come back in stabilization and adaptive recovery, which is sort of where we are now. And really using those lessons learned from the stabilization and the adaptive recovery for the institutionalization of some of the things that we learned. What we will show you is, of course, Fairfax is an extremely dynamic force in Northern Virginia and the DC metro area. But there were some parts of the community and parts of the economy that were not completely a part of that trajectory before the virus and before COVID-19. And so thinking about what a recovery looks like that not only continues to expand upon the growth that you saw before, but also starts to get to some of those weaker parts of the economy is part of the way we're viewing this. And what this diagram is supposed to show, and I apologize for the...
Sorry, Jeff, it's when the file got converted from PowerPoint to PDF. Sorry.
Oh, it's totally okay. And we can circulate another draft. But what this shows is there's a point at which in the beginning where you make a decision to have a just and resilient recovery and start to solve some of those issues that were existing before, particularly from an economic sense. And the difference between that, the gap between that and a recovery as usual, which is really not really focusing on some of the weaknesses, but just sort of moving forward as usual. So that'll be a theme throughout our work and has been sort of a foundation for the way we think about the work moving forward in Fairfax. So with this, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Olivia.
Thanks, Jeff. We can go to the next slide. And just to start, first to speak to Fairfax County's growth and position pre-pandemic and pre-2020. Really in the decade leading up to 2020, Fairfax County had experienced strong growth for that entire period, experiencing an annual growth in jobs of approximately 9% per year, reaching just over 700,000 jobs in 2019, an increase in median household income to over 122,000, the third highest median household income in the Washington, D.C. MSA, and unemployment falling to 2.3%, the lowest unemployment rate since prior to the Great Recession. We can go to the next slide. And many of these jobs, over a third, were in industries with average wages over the median household income, concentrated in professional, scientific, and technical services, with a significant amount of jobs in government and healthcare and social assistance, but a concentration of jobs representing the professional services and technical services firms that have chosen to locate in Fairfax County. Next slide. As the pandemic occurred and started to affect the job market, between March and October of 2020, 130,000 initial unemployment claims were filed in Fairfax, with a high peak the week of March 29th, when the county recorded 21,000 initial claims. And though initial claims declined throughout the summer and fall, as of this fall in October, they remained 4.3 times higher than the average week pre-pandemic. We can go to the next slide. And overall, that peak reached about 50,000 claims, continuing claims, during what we've called phase one, which was really emergency response going through the period of shutdown, and then was sustained into the initial periods of reopening. And while it trailed off, claims from June through October still averaged around 33,000 per week, or 28 times the normal rate, though they did continue to decline into and through the fall. Next slide, please. And what we saw was that Fairfax County had sustained a job loss of approximately 48,200 jobs by the fall, so by October when this analysis was done. The county had also regained about 30,500 jobs, and we projected that if recovery continued at that pace, would recover another 9,800 jobs by the end of 2020. So while many jobs would be recovered, the labor force had also shrunk by approximately 22,000 workers, and then the amount of jobs that remain lost are still of great concern, particularly because of the characteristics of those jobs. If we go to the next slide. Overall, this job loss, prolonged unemployment, and business closures ripple through the regional economy, and we quantify that in lost labor income, lost gross regional product, and lost value of goods and services, reaching $2.9 billion in lost labor income, $4.2 billion in gross regional product, and $6.9 billion in total output. So between 3.5% and 4% of the pre-COVID regional economy. Next slide. And as mentioned before, you can't quite see the differentiation here, but I think what's still clear is the industries in which those job losses were concentrated are primarily in accommodation and food service, healthcare and social assistance, and retail trade, with those three making up over half of total job losses. And if we go to the next slide, it's notable that uneven distribution of job losses really impacted low-income workers, workers who are people of color, and people with relatively low levels of formal education and training. Workers who were more likely to face pre-existing inequities than triggering a longer road to economic stability. So of job losses, 90% were in industries with average wages below 80% of AMI, remarkable because of how many industries have average wages above median household income in Fairfax County. 63% took place in industries with higher than average representation of people of color. 74% took place in occupations that required a high school diploma or no credential. And 76% took place in occupations that required short-term or no training. Creating a challenge both for workers who are suffering these job losses, as well as their sort of road to recovery in terms of their ability to find other positions and other positions that provide a true living wage and high quality of life. Next slide, please. Another part of our analysis as we sort of move forward, we reached out to over 35 stakeholders and organizations and received 29 responses to an online questionnaire that were really aimed at helping us understand what the specific impacts of the pandemic on business owners, employers, workers, and service providers in Fairfax County were, and what they perceived as barriers to and strategies for recovery, from which we developed a set of needs and challenges that then form the foundation for our recommendations and the recovery framework. We can go to the next slide. These challenges are noted below and are divided into two characteristics, two groups. One that is based on the impact to industry and employers. So things we heard from business owners, industry representatives, service providers, and one that's really focused on impact on workforce and potential talent. So impact specifically on workers and thinking about those that service providers serve, their client base. While all of these are sort of near and midterm concepts and concerns, all stakeholders that we spoke to also agreed that a long-term goal of recovery should be building toward a new normal and thinking about a more just and equitable county and economy going forward. What we heard from from industry and employers was a disproportionate impact across industries, with those that were struggling the most to recover being in tourism, restaurants, and retail, particularly small businesses. A decline in consumer and workforce confidence in terms of shoppers returning to commercial centers and workers returning to the office, and the potential for a threat to talent attraction and retention going forward. From those representing workers and clients to service providers, we heard of challenges associated with the disproportionate impact on low-income and minority workers, a shift in demanded skill sets, making it harder for workers to seek and find new employment, a wave of newly vulnerable residents that historically had not needed county or nonprofit services that was straining the capacity of nonprofit service providers and public education institutions to meet their needs, and an exacerbation of barriers to economic opportunity due to inequitable digital access and literacy, inadequate childcare access and affordability, and disparate health impacts across the range of those workers who were being impacted. I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk about some of the recommendations coming out of this work.
Thanks, Olivia. Next slide, please. So tying directly with what Olivia outlined is what we heard, we have a couple of sort of points that we're starting to think through as recommendations. In business recovery and resilience, in these categories, business recovery and resilience, partnerships and support for service providers, and regulatory action, which tie to what you heard before. The first, under business recovery and resilience, launching a small business recovery and resilience program focused on delivering technical support to small businesses in the industries most impacted by the pandemic, identifying strategies to reduce business costs, and including through engagement with private sector landlords and lenders, just thinking about workouts and other things. Launch a dynamic buy local campaign for small businesses throughout the county focused on goods made in Fairfax and elevating minority-owned businesses, given the impacts that we saw from COVID. For partnerships and support for service providers, creating a detailed office or position within the county to liaise with the county's ecosystem of nonprofit service providers, and strengthening and expanding partnerships with local and national philanthropic organizations to continue to build partnerships so that everything doesn't just rely on the government to move forward, that it's done in partnership with other organizations. And then on regulatory action, continuing to improve the online permitting process, particularly for commercial users making pandemic-related improvements. We've seen lots of advancements across the country in governments moving towards almost universal online processes and continuing to move Fairfax in that direction. And then continuing to advocate for legislation that allows the county to prioritize local purchasing so that those Fairfax supporting investments can be made. Next slide. On workforce and talent, those things that directly go to directly support workers and families, leveraging county resources to link job seekers with employment opportunities, given the impacts that we saw in the sectors, as Olivia mentioned, and potential job training and placement that needs to happen because of the instability in those sectors and what will come back and what may be jobs lost for good, and being able to upskill people into other types of jobs that might potentially be higher paying and higher wage jobs. And then convening countywide partners to improve certification, skills-based job training, and reskilling programs, as I said before, to meet those workers' needs. And then supporting workers and families, going back to the child care point that Olivia raised earlier, expanding access to affordable child care to enable more parents to take part in the workforce. We saw a great deal of happening both in Fairfax and around the country as it related to women and children, and the needs that the pandemic definitely has exposed for women and the ability for women to continue to work in these situations. Partnering with internet service providers to ensure that all Fairfax County residents can have access to affordable internet service, which is a key to accessing economic opportunities. And frankly, almost every service that we see today, particularly in the pandemic, is online, and the ability to continue to close that gap, which I know there's been a lot of work being done by members of the team at the EDA on this issue. And then creating a client-facing system for Fairfax County residents to access health services and social services support, making these systems more efficient and allowing residents to get the support they need to resume work in normal life more quickly. Almost sort of a one-stop shop approach to thinking about health services and social services, so it's much more efficient to get to. Next slide. And then finally, and this sort of goes with some of the conversation that Debbie had earlier about physical and community planning, and focusing their efforts on recovery and corridor level resiliency, including tracking business vacancy and impacts on the surrounding communities. In areas of economic strength, which there are many in the county, this means maintaining county support for attraction and retention of residents and businesses, continued development and expansion of public-private partnerships, and then in emerging districts and areas facing underinvestment in parts of the county. This means building on existing partnerships with organizations, engaging in community-led revitalization initiatives, and identifying catalytic public-private partnership opportunities aligned with community needs, and much in the way similar to some of the conversation that Debbie raised earlier. And I know there are projects like this that the EDA is involved in, but it is worth exploring as part of the sense of place and the ability to continue to transform communities in Fairfax to attract, retain, and ensure some level of affordability for the workers and people in the county. I think there may be one final slide. Yes. So the last piece of this, and actually, Olivia, why don't you talk through this, the prioritization piece, because I think it's really important thinking through, I think as Alex said before, sort of first moves, things that we think can happen more quickly than some of the near-term and long-term, mid to long-term actions.
Sure, thanks. So we've started to prioritize some of these recommendations based on need. So where we heard sort of the most pressing need to support businesses and workers in particular as we face and continue recovery. And also feasibility. What can be rolled out quickly to have the greatest impact to support the most people, businesses, and overall economy. So our first move for businesses would be to launch a small business recovery and resilience program that could include multiple initiatives and that may evolve over time as businesses continue on the path to recovery. So early moves could include things like providing support for businesses to increase or improve their online presence, ensuring that businesses have access to the technical assistance they need to apply for business support funding, and starting to think about future business emergency and resiliency planning. And then launching a dynamic buy local campaign for small businesses. We've seen these across the country and we've seen it already in parts of Fairfax County, but really thinking about how we can emphasize for the county overall, made in Fairfax goods, shopping from and supporting local businesses, emphasizing the impact that local spending can have on the local economy and the benefits of doing so. In terms of first moves for workers, finding creative ways to hire local workers to support pandemic recovery efforts. We've seen this across the country where jurisdictions have hired local artists, designers to create compelling campaigns and materials around COVID-19 safety, pandemic recovery, vaccination, et cetera. And there may be a broad range of things that Fairfax County could hire workers for locally, including some government functions and others to support recovery efforts. And then strengthening job training and placement programs focused on individuals unemployed due to the pandemic. Some of these initiatives are already happening within public education institutions, and in fact within the county, but really creating programs that allow people to get the training they need and focus on getting back to work as soon as possible, either through pursuing specific certifications and providing financial assistance for doing that, bringing together the multiple resources that exist throughout the county to access job training and placement programs, and helping people to understand what the complete pathway is from a training program, certification, or continuing education into a job. And then once they're in that job, what additional opportunities are open to them in terms of continued education and training and upward mobility in those companies. As we look further down the line, we then incorporate things about identifying strategies to reduce business costs. So programs where you may need to partner with landlords or other funding sources to make larger moves to reduce business costs and support businesses' recovery and future resilience. This could dovetail with dedicating resources to partnerships with local service providers and philanthropic organizations, strengthening the capacity of those organizations, continuing to improve the online permitting process, which we know is an ongoing endeavor and will certainly continue to evolve over time. I think just generally, as more and more services move online and as practices for that improve, but also can continue to improve specifically in response to the pandemic. And then continuing advocating for local purchasing legislation, which may take longer as it works its way through legislation. And then for workers and families, focusing community revitalization's effort on recovery and corridor level resiliency, which is really a physical and community planning effort that we know is happening, but can really start to engage communities where they are and will be an ongoing endeavor. We also understand that there are ongoing efforts around expanding access to affordable childcare. So thinking about ways that we do that now, and then it transitions into the future to create a more supportive, resilient economy. Partnering with ISPs to ensure that all residents can access affordable internet service, which again is dependent on the time and effort it takes to work with those partners, but really starting to think about access to the internet and access to online services, as Jeff mentioned, which are almost all now, as a necessity for people to participate in the economy, and making sure that we find ways to overcome barriers to that now, especially for people whose incomes and economic situations have been significantly impacted by the pandemic. Convening countywide partners to improve certification and skills-based job training and reskilling programs. So this is really an extension of the first move around job training and placement, but something that we think could be powerful in the county. One of the things that we heard from stakeholders was that there were so many initiatives going on around skills-based job training, certification programs, job and career pathways, that there really needs to be a sort of focused effort to bring them together and harness that to reskill, retrain, and employ more people. So it's really a partnership between the county, organizations like the EDA, major employers, and likely higher ed institutions. And then creating a single point of contact or access for county health and social service support, which we know would be a long-term initiative and one that would take a while and considerable work to build out, but could also help to support systems like that in the case of another emergency or disaster, to ensure that more and more people, more and more Fairfax County workers and residents aren't falling through the cracks. So that's the rationale for prioritization. As Jeff mentioned, these are ideas that we're starting to think through and are still receiving some feedback on as we finalize this framework. And this is sort of the picture of how it could be rolled out. And with that, I think that's the end of our presentation. So happy to take questions or provide clarity as useful.
Olivia, can you go back to slide 14? Or can maybe Alex, I guess, if you're driving it.
Thank you.
So when we talk about, one of the first things you talked about was providing technical support to small businesses. What did you mean by that? Is that helping small businesses who can't sell stuff online or not using technology to help them be able to sell their goods? What did you mean by that?
So technical support and assistance can include a wide range of services. I think certainly helping businesses that aren't already online or don't have a strong online presence get online is really important, especially now, and especially to helping them weather the stages of recovery before they can safely reopen and there are consumers back in shopping centers. It can also include things like helping businesses that don't have strong banking relationships, either form those relationships, understand sort of best practices in business planning, access funding and financing programs, think about emergency planning. So it's really technical assistance not having to do just with their access to technology, but really all aspects of their business planning to support their ability to weather disaster and also future resiliency.
If I could add, one of the things that we found across the country is a lot of small businesses did not have the planning capacity or had not sort of built the capacity internally to connect to organizations and systems of information to even know how to apply for a lot of the assistance that has been out there, say the PPP, for example, or other more localized state, county, city-based programs. And so a lot of work has been, in a lot of places has been spent on making sure as many of the small businesses as possible who are, drivers of the local economy and frankly to all of our government clients, the tax base of the counties and cities, that they are able to take advantage of a lot of those programs. And so there's been a lot of technical assistance between local government and intermediaries, other organizations, small business organizations, to make sure you're getting as much of the information out there as possible and offering technical assistance on how to do certain things to get these businesses, access to the funding that's available to stabilize them, which also stabilize the tax base of the local government.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about what's the next step here, and there seemed to be, it would seem there's an investment that will need to be made, and I'm curious about funding for some of these initiatives. How would that work?
Well, I'll say, first of all, we are, because much of our work is done with county and city governments, we know how very stretched everyone's budgets are. So a lot of this work is about how to do it in partnership with other organizations, and that's what a lot of other communities are doing. There are resources that county government and city government already direct to service organizations and small business organizations, that sort of stuff. And so how can you make use of and almost sort of reprogram some of the funds that you already have out there? But also there are a lot of organizations that, you can have an idea about something that you can partner with organizations that have different types of funding aside from government funding, taxpayer funds to put into things. So my answer to that is, I'm not trying to dodge the question. Yes, there are some things that will take county funding, government funding, but there's a leverage point for different types of resources that can be brought to the table in partnership to achieve some of these.
I think my internet just.
I think Kathy's
stable. Any other questions?
Chairman Lang, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. Wonderful report, Jeff and others. I really enjoyed hearing you guys make this presentation. So is this your final round of presentations, or are we to expect some additional reports from you all?
This is our round of presentation to this commission. This will help us actually wrap up our report that we will be delivering to the EDA and the county, but we are open to comments and anything. Part of the reason why we're doing this now is anything that any of the commissioners have to offer, please send those over our way as we start to get into the final stretch of the development of the framework.
So as you go about the difficult process, and I guess from your perspective, you're an expert in this, so it probably is not difficult, in framing your final report to the commission, how granular will that report be? Will you actually be sending us, some of your, your data sheets, your methodology reports? How do you get to some of these conclusions and recommendations that you're making to us, so that we can at least look at and have some appreciation for the methodology that your team went through to get to this point? Are you amenable to providing that baseline data to us in your final report?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what we intend to do. There'll be a report formatted like this, but there'll be a series of appendices with all of that data, additional when you look at these recommendations, where some of these recommendations come from, other jurisdictions that have these same sorts of recommendations. So all that data will be included in the final report, both in the report and as appendices behind the sort of the written narrative of the document itself. Olivia, am I missing anything in the answer?
Nope, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I would so much appreciate that. I think it would add tremendous context to the wonderful presentation you guys have made over the last month or so.
Absolutely, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would also add that and perhaps you already know this, but the chairman has a task force on equity and inclusion. And some of the recommendations I see and what you're coming out with, I think you'll see parallels coming out from a different vantage point, but it would be good. That's coming to a head too soon. So it might be good for you to take a look at some of the recommendations from that as well.
Will do, thank you.
Yeah. Carla Bruce is leading that. So if we need to make a connection, Alex, to help them, we can do that. Any other questions from the commissioners? That has been yeoman's work. I mean, really. And I'm just trying to absorb a lot of it. So I appreciate Commissioner Johnson's question about getting some more of the information. But anyway, thank you. It looks really, really like you've done an excellent job and really gotten to the heart of a lot of the issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the Commission, and to the EDA team, Victor and Alex and Spencer, who I see on here. Thank you. It's been a haul, and the data, particularly at the beginning, changed week to week. But we are anticipating getting something as a framework useful, not just for now, but for the next couple of years. So thank you for the time.
Good. Thank you very much. Great. All right. With that, we are going to move on to my report, which will be relatively brief. As you may remember, we have a board retreat in February, and we're going to schedule it from 9 to 1. I just don't think a full day would be of use to most of us. So we're going to really be very focused on 3 or 4 topics as we go through that morning and slight into the afternoon time frame. As usual, we'll do some normal board matters, and then we'll move into a closed session. And the theme of it is leading in an innovation economy. So this is where we're going to work to understand some of the things that we need to be considering as we look at an innovation economy, and especially what has gone on and what are the things that we need to do moving forward. We will have Spencer Levy from CBRE to come back. He is confirmed to talk about, to give us a regional economic update and perspective on real estate. And I think that will be good to help set the stage for us understanding how he sees what's happening as we move forward. And the other sessions will include a year in review, focus on talent and communication in an innovation economy, and some of the operational things that I think will come out of that. In addition to that, we'll focus as a board on some of the things that we need to do to support the team going forward. So more details will be forthcoming. And then in March, we will have a speaker. The topic will be return to office, and that will be by David Ritchie, who is Executive Vice President of JBG Smith. So we look forward to hearing what he has to say. Be interesting to see how what he has to say, and Debbie spoke to us about tonight, how they may be in alignment. And then lastly, I want to remind everybody about the economic interest forms that need to be completed by February 2nd. So with that, that completes my report. And I will ask our President and CEO, Victor Hoskins, to take over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin by really acknowledging the wonderful presentation that Debbie Ratner gave us. I mean, it was really a great insight to very complicated projects. And I think the thing that I took away mostly, and really having my experience with her, was really the flexibility issue and having true partnerships. Those were really the 2 things that really drove the success of those projects. And I really appreciate her making the time to be here. So look forward to hearing more from her in the future and taking her on a tour. I'd also like to just take a moment to thank Lenny Hainsworth for the Zoom meeting that we did today with Dr. Washington and his chief of staff, Ken Walsh. She really did a great really service to the organization by giving her her connections to Northrop Grumman. It looks like we're going to be working with GMU on a number of things, but that's one we definitely will be working on in the near future. So Lenny, thank you for doing that, because I know your time is very valuable these days. In terms of, if you go to the slides, please. In terms of this month, it was a very interesting time for most of us. On January 7th, I had the opportunity to do a presentation called Catalyst for Change. This is actually a workshop series that Alex Imes and the Economic Development Alliance put together. And this one was really focused on how do you re-enter the office from a technology perspective. And one of the speakers was his name was Alan Shakar. He's with Car Properties, and he really talked about some of the practical things that they've already done. They've already technology that they've already implemented in their buildings, and it was fascinating to hear things as simple as counters on the gym, so that once a certain capacity is reached, you can't enter the gym, but you can exit the gym. Touchless fountains in the bathrooms and touchless doors. He talked about sensing devices that actually test the air and the air quality and pathogens in the air, and really can create alarm systems. And all of this to me was all, I didn't realize people were already doing this. And they were doing this throughout their property portfolio. And the other speaker, Serene, she was actually with a technology company that implements a lot of this technology. So I think that as we get through this vaccination process and we move into that return to office, and you hear more about this in March, and when Mr. Ritchie comes to speak to us, I think it will give us a lot of feeling of security going forward. Because what I see is really healthy environments being created from our workspaces. Not that they were extremely unhealthy, but they weren't as healthy as they should be, as they will be. And I think it was exciting for me to hear it, because I know that fresh air, that safe environment, that being careful about pathogens, on surfaces is extremely important to all of us now. And I think that it's going to be really an exciting time for office environments. And I think the thing that I really encouraged me the most was more office space. You just heard Debbie Ratner say that. He also said that really people are requesting more office space per person. There may be less people in the office, but with the more office space per person, people are thinking in the next couple of years, this will all shake out. And pretty much we will be maybe roughly where we are right now. So that was an exciting workshop. Next slide, please. This Coalition for Smarter Growth actually got postponed because of COVID. So we won't be doing this tomorrow. We'll actually be doing it early next month. Next slide, please. And I'll be doing an interview with Virginia Business to talk about, the year in review, what's happened since COVID. I am really looking forward to this discussion. It's interesting to look at back in April when our unemployment rate was over 10%, and to look at our unemployment rate now at 4.5%. This is one of the things that Steve Tarditi talked about today in our all staff meeting. One of the other things he mentioned was that the county and our team are working very closely on providing information to make sure that the frontline worker data is there. As a matter of fact, our team, it was Stephen and Bill and Serene and others in that group pulled together some information in an hour that did not exist before, specifically for the county, so that they could look at the manufacturers and look at the employment levels at those manufacturers to determine how many vaccines need to be made available. It was really something really important for us to be part of. And it's interesting how this interconnectedness with the county is becoming so essential. One of the things that Jeff did not mention, and I just want to mention right now, is Rebecca Modry and her team, their involvement on this economic recovery toolkit. I mean, we are working hand in glove on everything these days, and it really makes a big difference, because that way none of us have to really carry the entire weight. It's sort of answer to the question that Madam Chairman asked, how do you pay for this? How do you invest in this? Well, in a way, many of these things can be done if you just really kind of reallocate resources and collaborate more. And I think we're discovering that more and more. The last thing I want to mention is that we are moving along very well with the, I'll call it the DMV Economic Development Alliance. It's my vision that this time next year, that the DMV Economic Development Alliance is in place. By that I mean that we have moved ahead and we've gone ahead and really developed a partnership very similar to the one that we have with Nova EDA, but with a larger DC region, 6 jurisdictions in Maryland, DC government, and Northern Virginia. We have over, it's been an exciting time. The Entrepreneurship 101 is one of our, consistent important events. Karen Schma and Connie and Kathy, they really work hard on putting this together. They currently have over 300 registrants, 302 registrants for this event. This is the largest that we've ever had in the history of the organization. And there were so many that we had to change the registration allowance to allow more people to come online. It just goes to show you that this economy, when it comes back, it's going to come back roaring. This is not going to be one of those, normal return to normal in a normal way. I believe it's going to be like the roaring 20s. Next slide, please. I did forget about this, but I want to mention this. This is something that I'm very excited about, the Air and Space Innovation Series. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Fogg, who is going to talk a little bit about marketing, communications, and then after him, Mike Batt.
Hey, thank you, Victor. Great report. And yeah, more than 300 for our E101 tomorrow is amazing. We've really, it's going to be super. Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to be able to talk to everybody. Good evening. And I'm going to just give you a brief recap of media outreach highlights for December, and then go into some results for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So next slide, please. So December featured two notable placements. The first came from the Washington Business Journal, which looked into the comprehensive annual financial reports of Fairfax, Arlington, and Loudoun counties, and discovered that Amazon is a top 10 employer in all 3 counties for different reasons, by the way. Well, who better to talk about Amazon's growth in Northern Virginia than our very own Victor Hoskins? So we were very glad to oblige the Business Journal that time. The second placement was a little more opportunistic. The Washington Post lists job promotions and announcements from around the region on the Monday business page, and we took the opportunity to crow about our colleague Mike Batt's promotion to Director of Talent Initiatives. Now, this is a small thing, literally a small thing, but I want to tell you that by getting our name in the Post that day, we got, get ready, nearly $1 million in earned media value, according to our vendor. So this is a small item, but this was big stuff for us. So, and I was very excited to see that. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, please. So let's shift to some analysis of our media outreach efforts in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So first, how did we do in terms of share of media, share of voice, which really is mentioned in all kinds of media compared with competitive national economic organizations. So from July to December, we had a bigger share of voice than all of the organizations that you see listed here, okay, with the exception of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. Of course, that organization is budgeted to spend almost $900 million this year. It owns and operates 66 million square feet of real estate and has 470 capital projects and manages another 560 capital projects for other agencies. They are doing a lot of things, and it's a very different organization than we are. So they get a lot of coverage, is my point here, good and bad, by the way, for the developments that it works on, programs that it uses to stimulate small business and market innovative industry sectors in the city. And you'll see Austin did very well too, not as well as us, but pretty well compared to these others. And that was largely because they had some positive economic development news for that city and region last month. Next slide, please. So let's look at the regional share of voice. You'll see, of course, that we do very well compared to other economic development organizations in the area. And really, you might say that we dominate share of voice here, as we should with all that we're doing and that we're pushing out. Coverage of really all of the regions, and you see Arlington and Montgomery County did pretty well over 6 months, really focused on their grant programs that help small businesses try to survive the pandemic. But I'm very proud that we're doing very well here regionally, and actually I'm proud of where we are nationally too. All right, next slide, please. All right, let's see how our media outreach performed in a few specific categories. So how many placements did the EDA get in the first 6 months of the fiscal year? I'm very happy to say that between efforts of our in-house communications group and our teammates at DCI, we got at least 563 placements of all kinds: local, national, international, website, print, radio, television, according to our service that we use to track placements and monitor media outreach. Now, those placements translated to more than 900 million impressions or eyeballs. I am disappointed we didn't get to 1 billion eyeballs, but I now have something to shoot for in the next 6 months. So between the DCI and FCEDA efforts, the number and location of placements amounted to $22 million in earned media value for the first 6 months. So that's an ROI just in the first 6 months of 22 to 1 based on a $1 million marketing communications budget. Now, we switched to a more sophisticated media monitoring service in September. So I think that the $22 million number is a really excellent start to the fiscal year, and it puts us well on our way to achieving 50 million by the end of the fiscal year. Next slide, please. So lastly, I want to share with you this month's authority angle to showcase a recent comment in the media. This month's highlight comes from none other than the New York Times, which did a story in December, right before Christmas, about how the data center industry has grown during the pandemic. And in the story, the author noted the prominence in Northern Virginia, in a very New York way, comparing us and the cloud with Grand Central Terminal. So I thought that was really cool. So our business investment staff routinely tells prospects and clients about the excellent network and cloud infrastructure that we have in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia. And a good reason for that is because of the huge investment that the data center industry and providers have made in the region. It's another component of the regional IT ecosystem that is an important selling point for businesses here. And it's one of those many things that we crow about. I thought you'd appreciate the kind of national attention that it got. So we'll bring you another interesting authority angle next month. So thank you, as always, to my colleagues in the communications and special events division for the great work they're doing, and for our efforts of our colleagues at DCI, who are a big component of our big team and are a huge reason that we're being successful in media outreach. And of course, a big part of our media outreach centers around our talent initiative. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mike Batt, to give you the latest and greatest in that program. So thank you, everybody. Mike.
Thank you, Alan and Victor and commissioners. I appreciate that. And thank you for that nice plug in the Washington Post. That was very nice of you.
My pleasure.
Next slide, please. So what I want to do is just give everyone a couple of quick updates on what's going on with the talent initiatives. And it's interesting to hear some of the input from the HRNA folks today. I think we're doing a number of things that they're going to be that they provided some recommendations on, and I'll touch on a few of those. But the first slide here is just that it's the virtual career fair coming up, and I think this one's turning out to be bigger and more impactful than any of the ones we've done previously. I mean, we started off with about 10 or 15 companies, the first few career fairs. This one, as of today, 27. We added Appian this afternoon, which is they reached out to us, working with David Kelly, the national team, and they're like, we're hiring hundreds in cloud. We're headquartered in Tysons. Can we join? I'm like, yes, we will make it happen. So, I mean, we now have 27 companies hiring a minimum of 6,000. So it's really coming together. I mean, as of this afternoon, we already have 300 applicants registered for this event. We really haven't even started the real campaigns yet. We're working with, again, and I echo what Alan said, with our great partners in DCI. I mean, we're partnering to do a lot of press, a lot of paid media. We're working with I noted last time, military.com and multiple other avenues to really get the word out and get the right applicants. So we're really excited about this event coming up. So stay tuned for the stats on how successful this is or was next month. Next slide. here, and this is really just the last slide I have, just to touch on a couple of other unique things we're doing to really expand on our mission and trying to continually find new ways to connect talent with our companies here. The first one, and we ended up showing you a full slide on it, was just the career fair coming up. But the second, the middle piece there, we've signed our first sponsorship with a university out west, University of Southern Cal. And that we're really excited about because it's something we hope to really build a best practice on and replicate with universities around the country. And they're very excited. When we told them about the 87,000 jobs that we have here available, they really were proactive with us and asking to sign a sponsorship. They want to do seminars for their students. They have a career fair on February 3rd that we're going to get very creative with because they have 30-minute slots where we're going to plug in a number of our California-based companies with Northern Virginia offices to help us pitch, hey, yes, you might have heard of Splunk and Oracle and others, but guess what? We're here too, and there's lots of opportunities. So really getting creative with some sponsorships with USC, and we'll look to expand on that around the country. And then, I think this next one is really interesting too, especially on what we just heard from Olivia and Jeff and the HRNA folks around, again, trying to make sure we're helping those that have been displaced, and then also helping our companies find that talent once they've been upskilled, once they've been certified. So our next talent workshop that we're doing next month, we're going to be working with Stephen's team on, the VA Ready and other programs that NOVA has. We're working with George Mason University. They have the Mason Talent Exchange. And then we have some of the apprentice companies, Smooth Stack, Reviture. These guys, they are turning out some great talent through these upskills programs, but they're asking us, all of them very consistently, saying, we need your help connecting with the companies. And a lot of these companies aren't aware of these great upskill certified folks. So that's a talent workshop that we're going to be doing on the 16th. And, we have the entire team here at FCEDA that's going to be driving all of their companies. And, we're almost up to 700-800 HR talent contacts within our Salesforce tool base now, because we continue to build on it every day on just finding new talent leaders and trying to help connect them with these applicants through the USC scenario, through these workshops. So we're very excited about what's going on and look to continue to just build on this momentum. So one thing I didn't have on the slide, but just a couple of quick stats on the first half of the year for the talent site. I mean, we had over 130,000 hits on that talent site since July 1. We had over 18,000 job views just in the first half of this fiscal year. And that's pretty cool because, again, remember those 18,000 job views? It's not just, hey, look, there's some companies out here hiring. That meant they found a company in Northern Virginia that's hiring and went to that job, which hopefully led to, it's tough to track, but which led to them applying for a job with one of our Northern Virginia companies. So really good progress and momentum. And again, this is taking the village. This is taking DCI, the communications team, the national, international, all of our offices. They're all doing a great job. So with that, I appreciate the time, and I'll turn it back over to, I think, Victor. So thank you.
Brilliant work, Mike. Really, really brilliant. I just want to mention to everyone and remind everyone that this time last year, we were still doing research on talent. We were still analyzing data. DCI was just coming on board, and they had not even done any and paneled anybody. I mean, Rebecca Gaiman and Aaron Jones, we had just met these people. We barely knew these people this time last year. This is astounding, the progress that we've made. I get a chill every time I listen to Mike talk about this stuff. Every time I hear Alan talk about this stuff, I just get a chill because I realize that this has just started. I mean, we're just at the beginning of this thing, and all we have to do is just be consistent, and we can dominate this space. And I believe that this space is going to be associated with our brand, and I think that's what is going to make us a magnet for drawing companies. I think this is a very interrelated space that we really need to take hold of and own. You'll be reading the New Geography of Jobs before the retreat. And I'll do a summary on it, a couple of slides, just to kind of go over the innovation economy and what Enrico Moretti is really talking about in his fundamental thesis in this book. But the thing that I want everybody to remember is that, you know, the idea is one thing, that innovation is important and attracting is important, but to actually execute like this is mind-blowing. I mean, we haven't even been doing this for a year, and it is already, you know, putting us in an incredible position. And I know that eventually we'll get to the point where we will not just know how many people came and viewed jobs. We're going to know eventually where they go, because the companies are going to want to know how many people that we placed. But after, you know, 9 months at this, 10 months at this, I think we're in a really great position. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chairman Lang.
It really is astounding. I can hardly wait to go to meet with our Board of Supervisors to show them what they have done with the investment what this team has done with the investment that they made. I think it will be absolutely stunning. So thank you to all the team. And obviously this is going to help a lot of people. Some get back on their feet, some find new positions, new careers, whatever. So thank you very much. It will help all of us. So with that, our meeting is going to come to a close. So what I'm going to do is to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Chair, Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you very much. I have a second.
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Quigley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, I think that's it for tonight. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in February. And Andrew, do you have any final comments?
Thank you, Chairman Lang. So that will conclude our January meeting of the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority Commission. I would like to thank everyone who has joined us tonight. And if any member from the public has any question, please email Cheryl Martelli. Once again, her email address can be found in the chat box. And for more information about the work of the EDA, please visit www.fairfaxcountyeda.org. Stay safe, be well, and have a good night.
Thank you very much. Good
Well
night,
done.
everybody.
Well done.
Well done.
Have a great
Very
evening,
well
everyone.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.